Been another slow news for Arsenal this week, particularly with regards to transfer dealings. Another week where we got gazumped by another club for a key target of us, with the news of Rodgers going to Chelsea for £170 million. I mean, that's a British record. And for someone that never really liked the deal, I wasn't really mad. And do not get me wrong, Morgan Rodgers is a very, very good player, but I kind of never saw how it was going to fit into the team or how it was going to help us solve some of the bigger problems we had last season. And for the amount that was being quoted by Villa, I never wanted us to do the deal. But regardless of how I felt, the fact still remained that this was a player that Arteta had singled out to be one of the key targets he wanted. And for some reason, financial reasons, we decided not to go with the deal. And I kind of understand where you're coming from. We've built this team. We've gotten to the level where City were or have been over the last few years, where they kind of have a budget for a player, and we're never willing to exceed that budget on whichever player they wanted. If the price that was being quoted was too much, they were always going to pivot to another deal. But this is where my worry comes in, because whatever plans and budgets we had coming into the window, that has to be scrapped, because with Henderson going to City for 113 million, that has become the benchmark for all of the transfer dealings this entire summer. So we kind of need to adjust our budget for the players we want. And we saw the same thing happen with Jeremy Monga going to City, where we had like a budget of 10 million, and for some reason we were not willing to meet the increased price that Leicester wanted for the Monga, and he had to move to City. It's the same thing that happened here again, because based on the reports that were being made, we had like a budget of 80 to 90 million, and as soon as Villa started demanding 100 and whatever they were demanding, we were not willing to meet the price being quoted, and that resulted in him going to Chelsea. And I do feel like we need to adjust our budget to be able to get the key players we want. Because regardless, say we go for a Bakula, they're still going to quote 100 and something million. That has basically become like the standard price for the better or for the key players that we would be looking forward to. And I feel like Beta and Arteta need to come to terms with this. But I would kind of like to know how much we have to spend. I know we made the most money in terms of revenue last season that we've ever made in the club history, but we also kind of spent the most money we've ever spent in the summer window, last window, and we got all of these players. We spent so much that we couldn't even pay the money that Leverkusen wanted for Incapi, that we had to restructure the deal to be paid this summer, and that's going to take away from the budget. So I kind of worry that, because we've seen this happen, like if you look back to the 23-24 summer window where we got Wise, Kai Havertz, Wire, Timber, we spent a lot in that summer. But in the preceding summer, we couldn't spend as much because the club wanted to manage the book better. And I feel like that is going to happen this summer. To what degree, I do not know. And I might just be wrong, but just looking at the fact that we've moved away from some key targets, I feel like we are kind of very, very worried as to the amount we're willing to spend on players. And I hope that these do not come to bite us, because as these players keep moving, we would be left with very limited options. I might even become desperate that we end up overpaying for a player not good enough to improve the team. That is just my worry. Aside from that, preseason started this week. We've seen pictures of some players. We've seen the one away picture, and that guy looks so bulked up. I was happy to see Timber back in on training. I don't really know how fit he is at the moment, but I'll be very, very happy if he's ready by the start of the season, because with Saliba gone, I would like all of our key defenders to be available for us to be able to manage Saliba's injury, depending on whether or not we sign a central back. And even if we do sign a central back, just having our best right back available is going to be good for the season. Anyways, yesterday I saw the Bleacher report where they made the, I wouldn't say worst player. I cannot remember the title, but I think is the most underwhelming players at the World Cup. They made the first 11 of the players that they didn't perform up to expectations. For someone that considers Gabriel to be the best central back in the world, I kind of do agree with the reporter. He didn't really have the best of World Cup. And that kind of got me thinking, and I decided to make my own gradings to Arsenal players. I'm going to be as fair as I can. I know I have my biases, but then again, my biases extends to all of Arsenal players. So I think I gave a fair grading. First player I couldn't even really grade was Raya because he didn't really play anything. He didn't really play any minute at the World Cup, and we all know that Raya is a better goalkeeper than Unai Simon. But Unai Simon held his own. It was good. He didn't really make any mistake. Whenever it was called, he was there and he performed well enough to win the Golden Glove award. So the first player I kind of gave a grade to was Noni Madueke. I don't think he had a bad World Cup at all. It's the same thing with Noni Madueke. He offs and puff. He does most of the difficult parts of the game. But when it comes to delivering the final ball or taking a strike, he just always kind of underwhelmed. His technical level is very poor for a player of his physical abilities, and I think we kind of saw most of it. In some games, he was decent, but he never really had anything to show for it. And for a player that played close to 290 minutes for that England team, for you not to be able to have any assists or any goals, you kind of must have been very poor in terms of output. Again, I do think he had a good or a decent World Cup, but just for the fact that I wasn't able to like generate any GA, it was a bit underwhelming. And as soon as he lost his spot, we never saw him again because he didn't really play any minutes of the semi-finals and any minute of the final. And I think that was fair because it wasn't really giving Thomas Tuchel what he wanted. So yeah, that's my grade for non Maduke, a B minus. The next player on my list would be Nkape. Similar to Nani Madueke, I don't necessarily think he had the best of World Cup. It wasn't bad, but he had that bad 45 minutes against Ivory Coast and Jamandi, where Jamandi just had him on toast the whole game. Like for like the first half of that game, Jamandi was on the right wing and was directly going against Nkape. And because I've not seen much of Jamande coming into the World Cup, I wanted to see how well he was going to perform against Nkape, who I consider to be one of the best defensive fullbacks in the league, in the world. But for those 45 minutes, Jamande had the best of Nkape all through. Like, I think he dribbled past Nkape 4 to 5 times. And that might not look like a big amount of number, but to put that into to like contrast that with what happened across all of last season, where Nkapi was only dribbled 19 times in just 45 minutes, Diamandi dribbled past him 45 times. That was a very poor performance from Nkapi, and that heavily influenced my grade of him. Because aside from that, it was pretty decent. I mean, he got a red card, but that was a silly red card to start with. So for Nkapi, I give him a B minus grade. It wasn't great, but I also think that performance kind of showed a player that has played a lot of games. If you remember, he came into the season injured. It took him a while to find his feet. And from January to the end of the season, he was arguably our best defender, in my opinion. And I'd never seen him really struggle in any game as much as he did against Diamandi. Yes, in the Carabao Cup final, Semedo had the better of him, but that was also because he picked up an early yellow card and couldn't really be as aggressive or as tight to Semedo as he would have liked, and that gave Semedo a bit of a leverage over him. So I feel like a more rested Uncapi would do better, but I can only judge based on the performances that we saw. The next person on my waiting is Zubimendi. This is also a player that played a lot of games last season, and I wasn't necessarily mad that he didn't play enough at the World Cup. I mean, there's only so much you can play when you have one of the best midfielders of your generation playing in the same position as you. And aside from the 21 minutes he had in the final, he never really did much. And if I was to judge based on that game, I would want to give him a B plus or a B grade because it didn't really do anything wrong. It came in for Rodri and kind of kept the tempo and the pace and the ball moving as well as Rodri was doing. So I kind of find the grade of a B minus a bit unfair, but again, it didn't really play so much. So based on those 21 minutes, I'm giving him a B minus grade. I am really glad he had a lot of rest. I'm sure he's going to get a week or 2 weeks more rest before coming back for the preseason. And I feel like this is a player that we need him to improve his level very, very well next season. I don't know if we're gonna get Bruno G. Regardless if we get Bruno G or not, I still feel like Zubimendi has so much talent and can play much better than he did for most of last season. I know people would come and tell me things like, yes, um, he had a great first half of the season. At one point, it was probably our best summer signing. I don't necessarily agree, but I do see where these people are coming from. And I feel like, yes, he got tired to end the season. His performance level dropped. So I was a bit pleased he didn't really play that much. And I feel like that's going to help him coming into next season, particularly with the fact that he still was part of a team that won the World Cup. That is a plus, regardless of how many minutes you played. The next on my grading list is AZ. And for AZ, I'm giving him a B grade. Similar to Zubimendi, not necessarily similar to Zubimendi, because he played a decent amount of minutes, but it's always the same issue I have with Eze. There were games where he came into the game and you could see his impact. It changed how um England played. He improved the team, but it also didn't necessarily do much or have that um highlight of a game that we can always look back to. Yes, he had the assist in the third place game, but aside from that, he didn't really play as well as I expect of him. And maybe that is my expectation being too high on him because even last season, he wasn't really great. Yes, he had some vital goals. He had some good games against Spurs, against Bayern Leverkusen, against Crystal Palace, Newcastle. He had key moments and key goals. But generally, I don't think he impacted as much as I expected him to do. Again, that might just be me having way too high, way too high of an expectation. The next person on my list is Martinelli. Kind of similar to Eze, although I feel like the moment he had with his goal against Japan was better than anything we had from Eze at the World Cup. But he didn't really play so much. But whenever he came in, he did he did enough to stand out. I do feel like a B grade is a bit harsh in the sense that a B plus for Martinelli wouldn't be that bad of a grade. Thinking about it now, because in the few minutes he had, he was very, very productive. But I still feel like a B grade is fair enough, given the fact that he didn't really play enough. And Brazil also didn't go far into the competition. Maybe we have seen him play more games, particularly with Paqueta getting injured and him coming into the midfield. That would have been nice to see more of. But I don't know. For some reason, I just feel like yes, he had good moments, but I wasn't that impressed to give him anything more than a B. But I can see an argument for him getting a B plus. The next player I have is Kai Havertz. He had 3 goals at the World Cup, so that is a decent return. I wouldn't say that is a good return. Like it did, it contributed well for a German team that wasn't really that impressive. It was one of their better attackers, but then again, 2 of his 3 goals came against Croatia, who I think they were like the smallest nation to qualify for the World Cup. So I mean, I'm gonna dock him some point for that. But then again, you can only play the team in front of you. And for 2, 3 games, I think Kai Havertz was very good. I just feel like for some of the key moments where he could have done more or he could have imposed himself on the game, he kind of went missing. And it's not just a Kai Havertz thing. A lot of the German attackers were not that impressive. I mean, a funny place with Kai Havertz, if you look at his stats, over the last 9, 8, 10 games, they have been very impressive for a striker at any level. But I still do feel like just so many times you would wish he could do more because you can tell he has a talent, but for some reason we just don't get to see enough of it, in my opinion. So the next player I have on my list is Joe Corres. To be fair, he should have been a B plus because I think he had 8 goals and 3 assists or so. I think it was decent enough, but again, his team just wasn't good enough to go far into the competition. And maybe if he had played 1 or 2 more games, his numbers would have been better. But in the games he played, it was decent enough and good in some game. And I think that a B plus would be befitting. The next player I have on my list is Gabriel. And again, like I said earlier, Gabriel is basically the reason I decided to make this video. And for those of you that have watched how many videos, this should be my 7th, 8th video now. I know that anytime I have a chance to praise Gabriel, I am always going to praise him. In my opinion, he is the best defender in the world. He's been Arsenal best defender since the 23 season. And he's just one of those players that you just feel rest assured having him in your team. But in the World Cup, he wasn't necessarily great. I mean, in the Norway game, Haaland had the best of him. It feels like in the last 3 encounters against Haaland, Haaland has kind of had the better of Gabriel, and that is becoming a bit worrying given the fact that we are going to continue to see both of them go head to head for the foreseeable future, I hope. And I feel like at some point in time, it needs to get back to the level of having the advantage over Haaland. And I know we are just talking about Haaland like he's just any player. Haaland is probably the best striker in the world right now. He's one of the most physical striker, and I feel like his physicality would always give him an advantage on most defenders. Though I trust Gabi to deal with him, I feel like that Norway game kind of docked a lot of points from Gabriel, in my opinion. I think they also got blamed for the Morocco game in their first game. At the point when that happened, I think that was a bit unfair because the one was a bit difficult to gauge. But because of the expectations that we kind of have on Gabriel, I feel like he could have done a bit more at the World Cup. The next player on my ranking list should be Bukayo Saka. When I was looking at his stats to prepare for this video, I was surprised he played close to 380 minutes. That's about 4 games if you divide it by 90 minutes. He played a lot of minutes than I thought, which then kind of reflected in his start. Because when I also saw his start of 3 goals and 3 assists, I was a bit surprised that he had that much of an impact at the World Cup. But I also do feel like his grade of a B plus is heavily influenced by his performance against France in the third place game where he had one of his best performances in a long time. That is the Saka we know. That is the Saka we've come to love. But since he picked up his injury in 24, we've hardly seen him at that level. And that's been a long time. Again, the nature of the game contributed to how we played because that game was a very open game, and it felt like for the first 45 minutes, France were not necessarily playing, so he had a lot of space to deal up damage, and he was very very good in that game. Aside from the game, the one thing that's kind of giving me encouragement going into the next season is the fact that he did come out to say that he is fit, and he came out to say that he wish he had played more, which is also very surprising given the fact that if Tuchel know or knew that Saka was fit, how come he didn't play in the semi-final? Because I've been thinking about that game. I don't think Tuchel came into that game not wanting to play Saka. I feel like the changes he made after England went a go up kind of he committed way too early to the defense, and with Rice going out, he just kept on committing and committing to the point that we kind of did not have Saka at any point in that game, and it was a bit disappointing, but I'm very, very glad he had that last game, that third place game, and I'm very, very happy with that performance. So for the World Cup, I'm giving Saka a B grade, and I hope that performance continues into next season. The next player I have on my list is Declan Rice, and this is where I'm probably going to catch a lot of flack from Arsenal fans. I don't think he had the best of World Cup, in my opinion. I am giving him a B plus grade. And maybe that's a bit unfair given the fact that he came into the World Cup. I've played a lot of games for us. We had the news of him probably playing through injuries, and I think that impacted his game, particularly against Norway, where aside from the injury he came into the season with, he also fell sick within that period and had probably his worst performance against Norway. So I was also very happy that he had a good game against France to kind of end this World Cup. Though, to be honest, I was mad when I saw him on the team sheet to start the game. I'm like, this is a player that could not even finish last game. This is a player that has played too many minutes. Why was Tuchel playing him in a meaningless third place game? Well, I'm glad he did. I'm glad that is the performance we are most likely going to remember Rice for in this World Cup. The next player I have on the list is Trossard. Yes, I know he's no longer a national player, but going into the World Cup, he was a national player. I watched the World Cup knowing he was a national player, and I was very, very impressed by his performance. He had about 2 goals, 3 assists, and created 17 open play chances. That was like the most at the World Cup. And in a team that had a washed up Kevin De Bruyne, they had Doku. Trossard was by far their best attacker. Throughout this World Cup, Trossard was very, very good. I still don't know why I'm giving him a B minus, but ignore the grade that you're currently saying. I think an A grade would be much more suitable for. The next player I have is Odegaard, and I'm also giving him a A minus. Maybe that's a bit unfair. I don't know. For a player that had he had about 4 assists in 5 games. That's what else? What else do you want from him that he didn't necessarily do for Norway in the World Cup? I was just glad to see that Odegaard was playing as real as he can. I was glad to see that he was playing 90 minutes game. I was glad to see that he was contributing to the team. Though I felt like Norway played way too much of their game through Odegaard because he was at the center of everything that they did. And yes, that helped them. And that would also help Odegaard to know that he has this in him. But I do feel like maybe if they've played a bit more diverse, they could have done more. But they did well enough to get knocked out at the points at which they did, and France was just a much better team. I don't know what they could have done to beat France in that team, but I feel like Odegaard had a very, very good World Cup, and I'm very, very delighted he can carry this form into next season. The next player on my list is Saliba. Saliba was excellent at the World Cup, though I'm giving him a grade. For the entire time he was on the pitch, he was great. And as soon as he picked up the injury against Spain, France's defense was never the same. Yes, Lacroix came in and I think he did all right. And I am someone that also with Lacroix, but you could just see the drop in level. And if you're trying to like blame players for goals conceded, I feel like he could have done better to prevent the second goal Pedro Porro scored to kill up that semi-final game. It's sad watching Saliba pick up an injury, but the joy of having him dominate the game was just fun to watch. I think he has probably one of the best highlights at the entire World Cup. If we remember the France Paraguay game where it was in a foot race with Almiron and the grace at which he runs, the grace at which he carries himself was just so fun to watch that. Even with the way Almiron collapsed after the entire thing just made it funny. And yeah, the player. That is the player we're going to be missing for the next 4 to 5 months, which is very sad to see. I really do like Saliba. Again, in my opinion, I think he's the second, third best central defender in the world. And I know that this might be an unpopular take with Arsenal fans because most Arsenal fans consider him to be the better defender when compared to Gabi. I think he's a better footballer compared to Gabi. I just think Gabi is a better defender, and you could check all the stats. You could check. I mean, you don't even need the stat. If you watch the game, you know Gabriel does more defensive job that you require from a central back than Saliba does. And this is no slight on Saliba. It's just there's we're just comparing the best defender with the second or best defender in the world. I mean, I'm splitting hairs here, but I feel Saliba was excellent, was great, and it's sad that we're going to be missing him for the next 4 to 5 months. And I'm also worried as to how we're going to manage without him. And this brings me to, in my opinion, Arsenal's best player at the World Cup in Mikel Merino. Yes, he didn't play that much minutes. It was more of an impact sub. But Spain do not win the World Cup without Mourinho. Spain do not win the World Cup without his goal against Portugal or his goal against Belgium. He was instrumental. Even in the goal that Ferran Torres scored, the job Mourinho did to drag all those defenders to him to create the space for Ferran Torres was just great to watch how much of a pool he has. If we remember at the start of the season when Gyökeres was struggling to find his feet, all of the arguments were being made as the fact that he pulls defenders to him, that creates space to other that creates space for other players. But Merino does that better than him. Like I don't care what anyone does or what anyone says. And this is not just a Spain thing. If you go back to two of our best games last season, the 3-1 against Bayern and the first leg against Spurs, against Tottenham, where Eze had probably his best game. But the impact Mourinho had, the influence Mourinho had on those games were just great because of how intelligent he is at finding space, at just moving around to create space for others, how good he is on the ball. Yes, he's a low touch player, but he tends to make the better decisions with football than most of our players. And again, I'm up for my agenda this season. I can see a world where Merino plays a lot of games next season in striking position, regardless of how fit your course or Kai Harvard is. Even Mateta, again, I am fully aware that this is unpopular. This is an this is not a popular opinion. I will play Moreno before I play Gyökeres and Kai Harvard. That is how much I like this player. And for a player that went through what he did, picking up the injury he did, barely having the fitness needed to end the season, and still coming in to be very, very clutch for Spain was just great to see. And Merino is such a funny player. This is someone we bought as a central midfielder that could also play as a defensive midfielder, and is probably ending up to become probably our best striker. I mean, he's the best finisher we have at the club at the moment, and I feel like if he can manage to stay fit, it's going to be very, very instrumental for us going into next season. And I wish he took the opportunity he had to win Spain the World Cup, maybe then he would not have gotten into the extra time, and maybe would not, and that would have prevented us from even seeing Zubimendi at any point. So maybe it was good he didn't score that goal so we could see Zubimendi. But again, Mourinho was that guy he's a very very good footballer, and I'm very very happy that he had the World Cup he had. He's had the season he had, winning the Premier League, winning the World Cup, despite missing a lot of games. He was instrumental for both us and for both Spain. And in this World Cup, in my opinion, in my grading, I feel like Mourinho was the best Arsenal player if we are just judging based on impact. And there we have it. But I'm just going to run through my best five players in the entire competition, regardless of club. And in my opinion, I feel Rodri was the best player at the World Cup. We are starting to get to the point where a Rodri versus Busquets argument would not sound silly anymore. Like we've gotten to that point where I can genuinely entertain an argument if someone comes to me and say Rodri is a better defensive midfielder than Sergio Busquets. However that sounds to you, that is your business. But I've gotten to that point where I feel like this player is that good. And I know Busquets was probably better. I still have Busquets ahead of him. But we kind of need to put into consideration the fact that Busquets benefited playing in that Spain team, playing in that Barcelona team. Yes, he was one of the key players that made the entire system work. But he still had mad players around him. He still had Xavi, he still had Iniesta in the midfield. He had a concentrated midfield, both in club and both in for country. Rodri doesn't have that, but Rodri has still found ways to impact game regardless of injury or not. This is a player that picked up an ACL injury 2 years ago, and yes, he struggled to find his form, but you could just see his imprint and influence in Spain game throughout the entire competition. The next player I have will be Messi. Argentina had no business making it to the final. He dragged them to the final. 8 goals and 4 assists, 12 goals contribution is. I mean, what else could you ask from a 39-year-old player? He was the best player individually at the World Cup. Messi was great. The next player I have on the list will be Mbappe. 10 goals, 4 assists, the Golden Boots, the most goals scored in the World Cup. It's Mbappe. And I'm also happy he performed this well because for as well as he had goals and assists last season, the past few years has been kind of hard on Mbappe because we've had a lot of people say nonsense about him. Yes, he needs a system around him to make him play as best as he can. But make no mistake, this guy is one of the best players in the world. He's probably in my opinion, the second best striker or the third best striker in the world because now we have Haaland, Kane, and him, and it's all about preference and choice at this point. But at the World Cup, he was France' best player. The next player I would have on my list would probably be Bellingham. 7 goals is a lot of goals to get from a midfielder or supporting striker. That's a lot of goals to get from anyone, and he built at England time and time without number. I think going forward, that entire England team has to be built around getting the best from Bellingham. My fifth player will kind of be tied between Paul Kubasi and Emery Laporte. He is way too good not to be playing in Europe, and I think he has a release clause of about 15, 20 million. We've been hearing rumors of maybe Barcelona going back to get him, and I think that would be good because they already have Kubasi. If you pair him with an Emmy Clafford, you have one of the better defense in the world, and I feel like they should do that deal if they can convince him to come back to Spain. So Emmy Clafford and Kubasi will probably be tied for my best fifth players or my top 6 players at the entire World Cup.